Thursday, March 20th, Executive Committee. We are now called to order, and we are convened as of 11:15 a.m. I'd respectfully ask everyone attending this meeting to mute yourself unless you are recognized to speak. Please note that committee meetings of the RTD Board of Directors will be held remotely via Zoom and will be audio and video recorded. The meeting recordings, along with the unofficial minutes of the meetings, will be posted as soon as practical on the board's website. During today's meeting, we're providing Communication Access Real-Time Translation, also known as CART. Anyone who would like to access this service should send an email to the RTD board office at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com, and a link will be provided. Additionally, the CART transcript can be automatically translated into Spanish for anyone who would like access to a live transcript of this meeting in Spanish. A live stream of this meeting is also available via RTD's YouTube page. I'd like to now call the roll for the committee members. First Vice Chair O'Keefe.
Present.
Second Vice Chair Whitmore.
I am here.
Secretary Nicholson.
I am here as well.
Treasurer Banker.
Present.
And I am here as well. So we have 5 in attendance, which is perfect. And for the sake of the record, I do see Director Larson has joined us. Director Chandler has joined us. Any other directors, Mr. Kroll? Nope. All right, perfect.
Sorry for that. I was not ready to unmute, and no, I don't see any others present.
Perfect. So for record, Director Larson and Director Chandler are here. I would like to open public comment to anyone who would like to address the committee regarding any topic listed in the published meeting agenda for the current and immediately preceding month. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please either raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. During this time, the committee will not offer any direct comments or responses. However, if you'd like to be contacted regarding your public comment, please email the RTD board office at rtd.directors@rtd-denver.com. Staff will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. If you're dialed in, press *6 to toggle your mute settings. Please bear in mind that by participating in this process, you're being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, then your comments will need to be submitted via writing. Comments can be submitted to the board office at the following email address, rtd.directors@rtd-denver.com. Speakers should begin their remarks by stating their names, and each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak. Mr. Kroll, who is our first speaker today?
Yes, we have someone who has dialed in, and their phone number ends in 6782.
You are recognized.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Thank you. I'm calling from a very non-smart phone. My name is Corey Gaines. I am a resident of Logan County, although I do visit and have plenty of family in and around where RTD charges sales tax. The reason I wanted to call in today was to offer some comment on the proposed changes to your open records policy. I first read about this in a February 20th Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition article. I emailed to the board my comment yesterday, which I will be changing based on an email correspondence I had with Mr. Nicholson yesterday. Mr. Nicholson has updated the policy, and the updates, I think, are a good change compared with what I wrote in on my email yesterday, but I still do have some concerns. I like that this newer policy lowers the bar and makes it easier for people to become, quote, members of the media. But I still have some concerns that this policy puts 2 different classes of people. One would be citizens, and the other would be media. While this lower bar is great, it still places an extra barrier in front of citizens. Citizens who are responsible to fund RTD, citizens who pay taxes. This isn't how it should be. This new policy is great in that it increases access for people to get records from RTD, but there ought to be one standard and one standard only. If the board decides that they would like to offer fee waivers, hey, I'm all about that. I'm in support of that. But you shouldn't be offering it to some and not to others. If you want to offer waivers and increase access, that's great. please do so for everyone, not just for those that are called media, even if that designation of media is now easier to achieve. If anyone has any questions, I would be happy to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Corey. Our next speaker, Mr. Kroll.
Chair Bouquet, at this time, there are no further speakers in the queue.
And were any email comments received for today's meeting?
There were no additional email comments other than the one referenced by Mr. Gaines in his testimony.
Excellent. Well, seeing no other comment, I'm going to close this public comment period. All right. There are 3 recommended action items on today's agenda. The first action under consideration by the committee is for amendments to the board operating guidelines regarding engagement with staff and meeting time management. For the board of directors to adopt amendments to the operating guidelines regarding engagement with staff time and meeting time. Do we have a motion?
So moved, Whitmore.
Whitmore is the mover.
Second.
Second is O'Keefe. Excellent. So I wanted to just give a little, Treasurer Banker. You're on mute.
If you want to talk a little bit and explain it, but here was my question or additional information. Sometime next week, I think it's about 2 days after our board meeting, Director Chandler and I are going to be sitting down and reviewing all of these. So you're probably aware of that, but I figured I should at least mention it. And so I think our goal, I think Kathleen is online here. I think our goal is to take a look at it and see if we could perhaps condense some of it. So my question then would be, should we wait on this, or should we go ahead and pass this today and on Tuesday and then put it back on the agenda if we have changes?
Yeah, great question, Treasurer Banker. So if you do see my weekly update, yourself and Director Chandler, I did make a note that the working group has began. There's 2 major things that yourself and Director Chandler will be looking at, and that is 1, our operating guidelines, and
Sure.
then the second is our board bylaw changes. So the way I imagined the working group that yourself and Director Chandler would be working for would be basically study our board operating guidelines, study our bylaws, and as you mentioned, I think kind of the goal for the operating guidelines is kind of clean it up and condense it so it's better to understand, not only for the directors, but anyone in the general public to understand. Same with the bylaws as well. They're outdated parts of the bylaws that do need to be read and reviewed. And the hope was that yourself and Director Chandler would kind of take a fine-tooth comb to it. And based on the work and the recommendations that you'd put forward, this most likely would be a conversation for the 2026 Executive Committee. So my recommendation would be to pass the operating guidelines. And as you see, there are some amendments that are going to be offered as well that I think is going to be a lot more palatable for directors. And then ultimately pass the proposed bylaw changes when it comes to our April board meeting. That way we actually have a starting point, because there are significant changes I believe that we need to be making for this year. And I want to make sure that you and Director Chandler aren't on, a time crunch. So that would be my overall recommendation.
Okay, well, thank you. That clarifies things.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, Director Chandler, did you have any other comments? I know Director Banker spoke, but all good.
No, I think that's good. I'm glad you asked that question, Director Banker, because that was my question as well, the time frame. So that does alleviate us, but just so that we have a time frame that we're not under that pressure. So you're asking us to have this really not done and completed until late of 2025? Is that the time frame? So we passed in the beginning of 26?
That's the ideal timeline I had in my mind, is again the executive committee in 2026 to look at the work that you guys have all done, do a true study of it. So for instance, when it comes to, we talked right at the beginning of the year of, hey, are these suitable bylaws? Is this really the most efficient way? Are the operating guidelines a little bit too long, as Director Banker has said? So the really hope is you guys have recommended language that would be presented to the executive committee. I think that the items that we have forward with the changes to the operating guidelines will make it a much more efficient process for 2025. And I also believe that the recommendations that will come forward in April for the bylaw changes will also create a much more efficient process for the 2025 year. So
That sounds great. Thanks.
excellent. Well, thank you both for your work. All right. So I wanted to just kind of briefly talk about kind of the big items that we're hoping for. And again, it's the question of efficiency. I've noticed, as the couple weeks on now months as the chair, that there's a lot when it comes to our operating guidelines that really need some changes so that we have a more efficient process when it comes to interacting with our full-time RTD staff, when it comes down to direct requests with RTD staff. And I believe this is going to allow these operating guideline amendments will really allow for, like I said, a more efficient process for us to go forward. It allows for more respect of staff's time, but at the same time, I think it really gets to a point where we can focus as directors of what our requests are and how those ultimately will make us better as policymakers. So happy to take any questions regarding any of the proposed changes at this time. I do want to state there are two proposed amendments. The first motion is one that I'm actually going to be taking myself, which is going to be actually on behalf of Director Guchenritter. I want to give him a shout out for the suggestion that he's making. And then we do have a second amendment from Secretary Nicholson. So before I get to the amendments, any questions regarding the changes to the operating guidelines? Okay, perfect. So, for the first motion to amend, I propose that the fourth bullet point under regarding communication and engagement with staff, which is page 9 for your packets, would limit the amount of time for which each director may utilize staff time no more than 4 hours per month for items related to board goals or committee work plans. The following would be added. The following would be added to the end of the sentence, unless the request is reviewed and approved by the executive committee. So in layman's term, basically how it is, and again, this is the amendment that's going on from behalf of Director Guchenritter, is right now the language that is currently being proposed is directors would be limited to 4 hours per month when it came down to these requests. It could, unless the request is reviewed and approved by the executive committee, that's the specific language that would be added to that. So I'm making a motion to move this. Is there a second on this amendment?
Oops, second.
All right, Director Baker is a second. I am the mover. Is there any discussion on the motion to amend? Okay, are there any no votes on this action? Okay, seeing none, so that will pass. That first amendment will be added, just that little part of language, so that will pass 5-0. Now, the second amendment is coming from Director Nicholson, and that's to amend the collaboration section of the operating guidelines, packet page 9, adding a new bullet point with the following language: to follow all RTD policies on communications and record keeping. Is there a second on this?
I'll second.
All right, Whitmore is a second, and Nicholson on your behalf would be the mover.
Yes.
Is there any discussion, or Director Nicholson, if you had any comments regarding this amendment?
Yeah, thank you. So this amendment, I just I noticed from some of our earlier discussions, both in our training sessions and at the board meetings, that the board at the moment did not have language that aligned our requirements for ourselves around our communications procedures and our record keeping procedures with those that we require of everyone else in the agency. And so I felt that it was important to ensure that that was in there because I think it is of deep importance to us, both for cybersecurity reasons, for open meetings reasons, for open records reasons, for us to be following those guidelines that, for example, encourage us to have, conversations related to RTD business using RTD technology, for example, and to, retain records, in accordance with RTD policies. So I tried to keep this very broad and not get prescriptive about you must do this and you must do that and you must do, because the goal should be to move us into alignment there, and basically give the chair the ability to encourage members to be in alignment with that, now that we have the processes that you've added to give the chair that power. So that's really where I'm coming from with that one.
Thank you, Secretary. Any further comments or questions? Director O'Keefe.
Could you please read the text again one more time, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me pull it up. So this is going to be packet page 9. It's adding a new bullet point with the following language: to follow all RTD policies on communications and record keeping. That's the exact language that Secretary Nicholson is suggesting.
I agree with the amendment. I'd like to ask everyone to consider putting "to the extent practicable" or something like that in there, because there is, I will immediately fall out of the rigorous compliance of this if I take a phone call on a work phone. And since 50, 60 hours of my week is with my work, and I get to RTD stuff when I can, that would allow a good faith effort, which I think is very appropriate, but an absolute effort is probably not achievable for me.
Okay, so just so regarding, you would like the language "if practicable"?
To the extent, no, I'd be even a little stronger, to the extent practicable, or something like that. I mean, it's Director Nicholson's amendment, so he could put, whatever. If you want to, shall make a good faith effort, which sounds a little weaker, but I'd like to have not a absolute for people that are not full-time employees of the district.
Yep, I've got a suggestion, having listened to what you said.
I figured you would. I talked long enough and you would.
Yes, to substantially comply. Is that good enough? Cool.
So the language would read: to substantially comply all RTD policies on communications and record keeping.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Gives the chair the ability to look at what someone is doing and say, you are not complying at all. And after being asked to, it creates that process, basically, a roadmap to helping people to move toward, and all of us really, to move toward more compliance with these processes.
Okay, excellent. So the language has been updated. So to follow, make sure we're following Robert's rules. Are you okay with withdrawing your original amendment and then proposing this one, Director Nicholson?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Do we have a second on this?
Second.
Yeah, and I was a seconder, and I'm in agreement. Second this.
So the language would change to substantially comply all RTD, comply and follow all, to substantially comply with all RTD policies on communications and record keeping.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So Nicholson as the mover, Whitmore as the second. Any discussions on this? Seems like we had a pretty hearty discussion. Are there any no votes on the amendment? Okay, seeing none, it will pass 5-0. All right, so now we're back to the main motion. So we have added 2 amendments to the motion itself. Are there any additional discussion on the operating guidelines, folks? Yes, Secretary Nicholson.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that I really appreciated the process that we had here. You and Jack went back and forth, and were willing to make a lot of changes to get this to a good place. And I think that that's especially important because, these are guidelines and they need to be things that we think we can actually enforce. They need to be, they're just words, but they're words that we imbue with meaning. They're not laws. And so, you know, I recognize as someone who talks a lot in meetings that, you know, these are going to encourage me to be succinct, and that's a good thing. You know, everyone benefits from healthy habits, and I believe that these guidelines are essentially healthy habits for the board. So thank you for working really hard on it, and I will do my best to, you know, eat my Wheaties and, you know, broadly try to live up to what's in these documents going forward.
Thank you very much, Secretary Nicholson. Any further comments? Excellent. I'll just add with this comment before I take the vote. I will say, Director Banker and Director Chandler, obviously this will probably be in your work plan as well. Make sure as you go forward with your working plan, I know you'll be doing this naturally, but there's going to be a lot of feedback from our directors. So be ready to be open for some comments and feedback based on how this process went. It was excellent. We got some excellent feedback, as Secretary Nicholson pointed out, but looking forward to the process going forward for us to review this in 2026. So, all right, now to the main motion. Are there any no votes on the main motion as amended? Seeing none, it will pass 5-0. Thank you all. Okay. The second action under consideration is the approval of the 2025 Executive Committee Work Plan. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
All right, Director O'Keefe, a second.
Second.
Thank
Whitmore.
you, Director Whitmore. Don't be shy, folks. We can keep the process going. So just wanted to touch base a little bit on it. This is in everyone's packet with the work plan itself. Couple items that just wanted to bring your guys' attention to. First, obviously, just for anyone who's new and looking at it, the work plan will go into 2026, just so that there's a natural little transition for our new executive committee. So did want to see that it did go to February of 2026 itself. Not necessarily saying the 5 of us will be back, but just wanted to guys keep you of note with that. The other thing that's going to be new for returning directors and of course new to new directors, we'll talk a little bit about this later on, but that's going to be, I wanted to bring attention to the mid-year retreat planning. Historically, as I've been on the board, we generally had our February retreat, and that most of the time was our only retreat. But we are looking forward to discussion of the mid-year retreat. A lot of that is based on the work that Director O'Keefe and Director Larson are doing right now in regards to the not only the short-term goal planning process for our CEO GM, but looking at the process itself. So those are just kind of the items I wanted to bring to attention. Did we have any comments regarding the executive work plan, executive committee work plan? Yes, Mr. Kroll.
I just have one comment, which is to highlight something that Director Nicholson had asked, Secretary Nicholson had asked to be added. We do a semi-annual review of director requests so that the committee can be aware of what's coming through and what's being requested of staff. But at the same time, given the board's goal to be more active in and present in the communities in which you all represent and serve, the ask was to have an update on director activities on a semi-annual basis. And so I've added that in there. And that would be further plugged for directors to continue to submit the form so we can track that and indicate everyone's activity on a broader setting.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Kroll, and thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Secretary. Any further comments, questions, executive work plan? All right, seeing none, I will take it to a vote. Are there any no votes on this? Okay, seeing none, it will pass 5-0. Thank you, everyone. All right, and the final action under consideration is for the executive committee to look at the records request fee waivers for members of the media. For the board of directors to adopt the attached resolution providing Quora and CCJRA request fee waivers for certain verified members of the media. Do we have a motion?
Yes, so moved.
I have Director Nicholson as the mover. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, and Director O'Keefe is the second. Okay, Secretary Nicholson, oh, excuse me, Director Chandler, did you have a comment?
No, I will wait for the comment period. I'll let Director Nicholson go. Thank you.
Excellent. You will be recognized after Secretary Nicholson. Would you like to present this item for us?
Yes, I would. I am extraordinarily excited to present this item today. So journalism plays a unique and critical role in building a healthy society, and coverage of our agency and our work is one of the most significant means by which we communicate with the public. It is due to the societal significance of the work of journalism that I'm bringing forward this resolution today. For over 50 years, the state has acknowledged the importance of public access to public records. That is why the Colorado Open Records Act and the Colorado Criminal Justice Records Act exists. CORA was passed in an era of deep division and distrust in government to help rebuild faith in our institutions and the people who run them. CORA requests have led to countless major news stories and important changes in how government runs. We are in an era right now of deep division and eroding public trust in our institutions. Journalism, both corporate and independent, has been critical in holding government accountable. This resolution is being run to aid in that effort, not just scrutiny of others, but of ourselves. It is being run out of the belief that we are better when public skepticism is better informed by the facts. Some of the most important journalism right now is being done by community outlets and the independent magazines that operate on a shoestring budget with no ability to pay for public records as a part of doing a story. This resolution is designed to enable outlets that want to write an article or two about RTD for their community to make a handful of meaningful requests without significant cost. It caps that benefit at $300 per year, which is 10 hours of staff time under the current CORA fees that we have. It caps that benefit at $600 per organization to ensure that many news entities can take advantage of it. It caps the overall cost at $5,000 per year for all the waived fees combined. This places a hard cap on the amount of staff time which can be consumed by the CORA requests, by the waived requests. And it requires that 10% of any request is paid for by the requester to create skin in the game. We are at a place right now where for so many agencies around the state, there are regular questions asked about whether we are doing the best job that we can and whether we are being as open as we are able to. We have seen just in the last month in articles about RTD, journalists raising the cost of CORA resolutions as barriers to obtaining records for their stories. Those sorts of sentiments do not help us. And this limited resolution, which sunsets in 18 months to give us the ability to reevaluate at that point, to look at the impact, to look at what requests are being made, and the impact on the agency, I believe significantly furthers both our commitment to improving public trust, to improving public communication, and sharing what we are up to, and our consideration and interest in reminding the public that we are here to serve them and to be open with them about what we are doing. As I mentioned in an editorial which I've submitted to the Denver Gazette, we are one of the few agencies that charges a reduced CORA fee already. And I guess to put the most clear way possible, this is a simple, inexpensive opportunity to be able to say openly and decisively that we are the most open agency in the state when it comes to public information. And so I'd ask you to vote yes.
Thank you, Secretary Nicholson, for presenting that. Director Chandler.
Thank you very much, Director Nicholson and Director Bouquet. First of all, I want to say thank you for bringing this up, Director Nicholson. This is a very important opportunity for not only the RTD district to bring forth this reduction in the barrier between us and media, but also for the average everyday citizen who is maybe interested in doing a piece, a positive piece even on RTD. This gives them the opportunity to come forward and receive that information. I would like to echo the nice gentleman, Mr. Corey Gaines, who testified as well. He is not only was a journalist, so to speak, a mainstream journalist, but he's also now a Substack producer. He does a lot of other alternative media. So I know that he talked about the difference between the barriers where all citizens really should receive the same treatment. So I know that is not an opportunity for an amendment here, but I would like to suggest that when if this passes, that we revisit that definition in 18 months and perhaps even open this up to all citizens. I think that's appropriate. We are now in an era of where we have distrust between government and citizens. And this is an opportunity for us to regain that trust. We can't have a civil society unless people trust their government. They should be skeptical, but distrust is actually detrimental to a healthy society. So I would ask that we would pass this amendment and then in 18 months revisit it and perhaps even expand it. But this is very much a good step in the right direction, and I applaud this committee for looking into this. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Chandler. First Vice Chair O'Keefe.
Well, the first thing I'd say is I appreciate what Director Chandler said. I think that's a great objective going forward. If this is kind of a first step and we can learn, positives and negatives out of it, and then, further improve it down the road, that sounds great. What I was going to say is one of my first jobs was, I guess I've been out of college for 10 years, was at the Rocky Flats nuclear weapons plant. And we had actual nuclear weapons material, tons and tons of plutonium, people that knew how to make bombs and the means to do it, or at least components of it out there. And the CEO that I worked under, she was emphatic about if you use any secrecy becomes the story, and you can never win that. And so I'm not arguing for an open book, but I do agree that this is a great first step to see if we can provide a little bit more transparency, or at least a nod toward it, and try to live that value of secrecy is never a great story. And if a nuclear weapons plant can take that step, I think we can do it as a transit agency.
Perfect. Thank you, Director O'Keefe. Director Nicholson.
Yes, thank you. And I just wanted to say I deeply appreciate the comments of both Director O'Keefe and Director Chandler, as well as Mr. Gaines. I think that trending in the direction of more openness and more availability, it should be our goal. If we had unlimited money, I would absolutely support opening this up to every citizen immediately. But obviously, as staff has pointed out, there are costs to every change like this, and we have to have a balance of what that looks like. So I think it's absolutely something we should revisit, and there may be additional categories where we decide this is something we want to open up to. There are cities around Colorado that have very specific and limited but different waivers that they've offered. Boulder, for example, waives fees for student projects because that's what they decided to do. And so I think that it's perfectly reasonable for us to say it's in our values to waive fees for other things, accident reports has been raised or something like that. So I think that, this is a first step. It is not a final version of what this can look like. To that end, the most recent version of this amendment was submitted to staff yesterday. I want to ensure that that is the version that we are under consideration. It's the one that I was describing when I was introducing it. So I would ask for just make a motion to amend this motion to move the most updated, the version 4 of the resolution, which has been submitted to staff. If I'm making that resolution properly, maybe someone can tell me. But Jack, is that appropriate to handle that?
So Director Nicholson, I believe what you would want to request is a motion to amend the item under consideration such that the resolution that's forwarded to the full board is the version that was circulated by the board office this morning.
Yes, that is my motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Keith is the second. Any discussion on said amendment?
I would actually like to pop in and just say that I appreciate the feedback from staff. This most recent version is in response to some of the concerns that have been raised. And so, I have done, I should say, I appreciate the outreach from multiple directors. Director Chandler also provided a lot of feedback earlier in the process. And so this resolution is where it is today because folks have been willing to answer questions and engage and try to, help shepherd this forward. So I really want to just appreciate that very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kroll?
Yeah, I would just ask for public transparency's sake, if Director Nicholson, if you could just highlight for those assembled and for the record what the substantive differences are between the draft that was in the packet and the proposed new version.
Yes, happily. Can I go ahead, Chair?
Yes, sir.
Chair?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the first change is instead of covering 100% of the first $300 in fees, the resolution now waives 90% so that some payment is required on any request past the first hour. Did I just lose you guys? No, there we go. Okay, sorry, it went black for a second. I was like, oh God, should I? And so thankfully, RTD, unlike other agencies, accepts credit card payments, which makes that less of a barrier than it would be if you had to send a check for, to get that second or third hour of request time. So I appreciate that. And I asked General Counsel Snyder if that is still currently the case. So I would ask after I read these off if she can acknowledge that is true, because that's important to me. The second piece is there was concern about the language requiring verification of whether someone is a member of the mass media. In order to align with staff's concern about wanting that to be more of an attestment, the language now asks individuals to attest and provide documentation of their membership in the mass media or of their membership in one of the two media trade organizations that are listed in the bill, which takes the burden off of staff to do that verification in that way. I will add that the state legislation that is going to be before the governor and likely signed by him, SB 25077, has the exact same exemption, uses identical language. That's where I borrowed it from. Which is to reference the Press Shield law. So I'm not sure how they plan to do verification under the Press Shield law as part of that language, but in point of fact, that law will apply to us. So we will have to do that verification anyway, if we want to get the way it's written, the law says basically, if there is a request from under the new definition, RTD can take additional time to respond to that request. I believe it goes from 3 days to 5 days and 7 days to 10 days for extenuating circumstances, except for journalists. So for journalists, they can say, I'm a journalist, I get the normal timeline of 3 days. And so I don't know how we're going to validate that under the thing. So maybe we'll use the same process, but that's a next 6 months conversation if and when that law is passed. The resolution adds a whereas section describing the unique role that journalism plays in informing the public about our operations, which is the justification for this policy. And the resolution adds changes an existing whereas to highlight that quora fees have been regularly raised as a barrier by members of the press, both in general and about us in particular, which is the reason why setting which is the reason for the significance of this item, the why now for this item. Those are the changes that have been made in the latest version.
Thank you, sir. Treasurer Banker.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Why are you asking for a 10% payment? It seems to me that's for a small amount of money, you're creating some administrative issues. Originally it was 100%, and I would support the 100%.
So I'll be clear, I would too. But there was meaningful pushback from, not pushback, but concern raised from staff that I think, as it was put, is something that is free is something that is not valued. And while I disagree with that, and I think that there is significant value in many things that I get for free every day, I am happy to make a modification like this to place even a nominal cost barrier, so that someone has to actually I think there are plenty of things in life where we place a small cost barrier like that, so that people do feel like they have to put something up in order to ensure that the requests are valid. So I'm happy to make the change in order to better align with staff concerns. And I don't know, I guess I don't think it'll be terribly burdensome to provide it, to pay a credit card fee, but happy to obviously I think staff can waive that if they want to on the whole thing. But I'm comfortable either way, whatever really the committee would like to see more to do this. So
thank you for the comments. Thank you for the question. Second Vice Chair Whitmore.
Yes, just to follow up with what Secretary Nicholson said, I would like to hear from legal counsel Snyder in regard to his changes, and then maybe this last conversation, if possible, please.
Ms. Snyder.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think to preserve the privilege, I'm happy to just stand on the advice in the email that I sent to the board. It is a policy call of the board, and you all are open to make whatever decision that you want to make on this. And I would defer to Jim and CEO Johnson if she wanted to add anything, but I'll just preserve the privilege of the advice in the email I sent.
Ms. Johnson, any comments?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, General Counsel Snyder. I echo the sentiments the General Counsel has expressed regarding the communique that was disseminated. She and I had an opportunity to confer, and I am in alignment with what was conveyed to the board. Thank you very kindly for the opportunity to opine.
Thank you both for speaking. Director Chandler.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Bouquet. I echo the sentiment that like information should be free for anyone to access. I mean, there should be no barrier, but I understand the difficulty that the staff is facing. I'll just give you a pause. There is a school district out east, and I'm thinking it's the Elizabeth School District, where there has been a gentleman who has just peppered them with request after request after request to the school district. And it's become to the point where there's like one person, it's their entire job is to take care of this gentleman's core request. And the school district is finding that it's becoming excessively burdensome. So the idea here is that this small fee would cause someone to pause and to then think, do I really, really want this information? And it's not a big enough where it's going to cause a huge barrier, but it is going to cause somebody to go a pause for a moment so that it doesn't become a harassment opportunity. And so I think that's the rationale behind it. So I just want to give everybody an opportunity to think that through, and to, again, as Director Nicholson said, respect the staff time. It's not a huge barrier, but it is an opportunity for us to, as citizens, if someone's requesting it, to take that moment and then pause. So I believe that's the rationale behind it.
Thank you, Director Chandler. Any further discussion in regard to the amendment being proposed? Okay, seeing none, I'm actually going to take a roll call vote on the amendment itself. And as again, in simple terms, in layman context, one of the biggest changes is the reduction from 100% to 90% would be the amendment. All right, Treasurer Banker.
Yes.
Right. Secretary Nicholson.
Enthusiastically, yes.
First Vice Chair O'Keefe.
Straight up, yes.
And Second Vice Chair Whitmore.
Yes on the amendment.
I'm also a yes on the amendment, so we'll pass 5-0. Okay, so now we're back to the main motion. I actually am going to take some chair privilege, unless there's other further discussion on this. I just have some questions for the secretary, and that is going to be in regards to the calendar year itself. So it's looking like, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like July 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2026. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct.
Okay, excellent. Director Catlin, I did see you unmute yourself. Did you have a comment? That might be an act. Okay, perfect. Okay, perfect. So, and then it does say that it's going to set a cap for 5,000 in fee waivers granted under the policy in a given calendar year. So would there be 5,000 given for the calendar year of 2025?
Yes.
And then 2026?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Those are my simple questions. That's all I needed. Thank you, sir. Excellent. Any further discussion on the recommended action? Okay, seeing none, I will take a roll call vote again on this. Treasurer Banker.
Yes.
Secretary Nicholson.
Yes.
First Vice Chair O'Keefe.
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Whitmore.
No.
Okay, and I'm a yes. So we'll pass 4-1 as amended. We will bring this to the full board. I do want to say my conversation is I believe this is best suited for the full board. I've heard from several directors in regards to this recommended action itself. So I'm looking forward to a lively discussion on Tuesday. So thank you, Secretary Nicholson, for bringing this forward to us.
Absolutely, and I'll just agree that I am also looking forward to the discussion there. And I will just say I held off on recommending people testify here so that they could come on Tuesday and enjoy with the full board. So I'm glad that we passed out of committee. That's
well, that's excellent to see. I will be in my nice little suit, so I'll be looking better in person for all of them. All right, thank you, Secretary. All right, we are moving on. That was our final action item we needed to discuss or take action on. There are 2 discussion items on today's agenda. The first item is the monthly government relations report for March 2025. Mr. Davies, would you like to present this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Michael Davies, Government Relations Officer. Starting with the federal section, not included in the written report was the outcome of the discussion with regards to appropriations and Congress and the President approving and signing a continuing resolution that provides federal funding for all federal programs, but including the U.S. Department of Transportation and, of course, the Federal Transit Administration, which is the main entity that RTD receives federal grant funding through. So that was approved. So a continuing resolution providing funding for the rest of the federal fiscal year was approved by Congress and signed by the president. That goes through September 30th of this year, 2025. Couple interesting things as a result of that continuing resolution. One is that public transit, as well as the Federal Highway Administration, both that are funded, formula funds that are funded through the Highway Trust Fund, did see an increase. So it wasn't the exact amount of money as federal fiscal year 2024. So federal fiscal year 2025 did see a slight increase that was in line with the authorized levels. And so that's just good news, I think, for transit. It was an $82 million increase nationwide. Again, that was meeting the authorized levels, and there was special language in the continuing resolution to do that. So again, just overall good news for transit. The unfortunate news as a result of doing a continuing resolution is that congressionally directed spending, or otherwise known as earmarks, were removed from the bill. And that's largely just a process of the appropriations negotiations that happen in Congress. In federal fiscal year 2025, the House appropriations bill did include $850,000 in a congressionally directed amount of money for RTD to use on the downtown rail reconstruction project. RTD has received funding through this mechanism in prior years, but because it was only included in the House bill, the Senate never even took up a federal fiscal year 25 appropriations bill. And so therefore, when it came down to negotiations for a continuing resolution, all of the earmarks that were in the House version of the bill were just dropped out of the negotiation, and essentially it was flat funding as compared to this federal fiscal year 2025. So that's the only, I think, negative impact as a result of the continuing resolution that I wanted to make the board aware of. Moving over to the state level, as many of you are aware, of course, the RTD board has taken an amended position on Senate Bill 161, transit reform. A few amendments were offered in the Senate Transportation Committee, and that's Transportation and Energy Committee. A few of the requests made by the RTD board were accepted by bill sponsors and made through the amendments. That was eliminating the ex officio members that would be appointed to the board, as well as allowing for the proposed accountability committee, or accountability committee 2.0 that is proposed in SB 161, adding a voting member for a not current RTD board member, and that was accepted. So one seat on that accountability committee will be voting and represented by an ex-RTD board member. And of course, that's not appointed by the RTD board. It is appointed by a member of the state legislature. And other than that, the other requests made by the RTD board, which was to add RTD current voting members on the accountability as voting members, or non-voting members on the accountability committee as voting members, that was rejected, as well as the request to remove any language with regards to the write-in candidates. That bill has stalled in terms of being scheduled for its next hearing. It is scheduled to be heard by the Senate Appropriations Committee, but has not been scheduled thus far. So we'll keep the board up to date, and we will continue to keep working with bill sponsors on potential amendments that adhere to the request from the RTD board's amend position. Moving to the next bill that I just want to cover is House Bill 25-1290. This is concerning transit worker assault and funding for training. As you all know, this is something that was included in the government relations program approved by the board, and really is something that has been a multi-year effort to see what we can do to create some deterrence measures around assaults on our transit workers. That bill was heard yesterday in the House Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee. It was approved unanimously by that committee and has moved on to the Committee of the Whole, and I believe actually passed the Committee of the Whole as a first reading earlier today. So good news there, and that bill is going to continue to move forward, and appreciate the partnership with ATU 1001 in advocating for that bill. Lastly, also heard yesterday was a bill that you all have previously heard me talk about. This is a bill that came out of RTD's state audit, and the Office of the State Auditor recommended this bill to the Legislative Audit Committee to move forward. It has to do with a very simple definitional change of RTD's operating expenses, or operating costs rather. And so that bill was also approved unanimously yesterday in the House Transportation Committee. It is already passed the Senate, so this is the last house for it to keep moving through before it is sent to the governor. Something that's not in the written report, but I know is of importance to RTD board members, is with regards to the Clean Transit Enterprise and the work that the Clean Transit Enterprise is doing to stand up the grant program created by last year's bill, SB 230. SB 230 did offer a new mechanism for revenues that can go to funding transit. The Clean Transit Enterprise is the entity that will administer that grant program. Just want to make sure that the board is aware that we continue, RTD staff continues to track and participate in those Clean Transit Enterprise board meetings. There was a board meeting at the end of February. Some comments and discussion was had among the Clean Transit Enterprise board members, but no concrete action has been produced, and there is no document or draft or concept that is out there to react to at this point. But just want to make sure I keep the board up to date on that, and we of course will keep tracking those. There is another meeting scheduled for the end of March for the Clean Transit Enterprise Board, and we'll follow those proceedings. Lastly, just moving to the local level, I know that our public affairs contractor is working closely with a lot of the board members directly, and we're working to really make sure that we can schedule you with local elected officials, plug you into existing forums such as county commissioner and mayor joint meetings. So we'll continue to do that. And then the only update I have that is not in the written report is that RTD did have an opportunity to join the Metro Mayor's Transportation and Mobility Committee earlier this week, and just quickly give an update and summary on largely Senate Bill 161, as well as House Bill 1290 that I just covered. And this is an opportunity to continue to build relationships with the mayors and engage with them. So that's all I have, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davies. Secretary Nicholson.
Yes, thank you. So two quick questions. The first one, I raised this over email, but I was wondering, have you looked at RTD taking a position on HB 25-1273? It's one of the housing bills that is up this year, and the significance of for us of transit-oriented development and infill in public transit has been a regular conversation and over the last couple of years, and a big factor in passing a number of transit and housing related bills. So I was curious if that's been on your radar, and if you'd be willing to bring back a recommendation to us next month, assuming the bill hasn't already passed and gotten signed by the governor by that point. And the second question, actually, I'll take that one first, and then I'll ask you the second one. So,
Mr. Davies.
Certainly, thank you for the question. I have been tracking it, aware of the bill. Am happy to just kind of bring it through our process and just to, again, kind of remind the committee the way we talk about this on a weekly level with our lobbyists as well as RTD staff is really kind of going through both Director O'Keefe and Director Whitmore, who are assigned by the chair as kind of a government relations liaison board staff structure. So we have our meetings weekly and absolutely plan to discuss your question there and that bill.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's basically what I was trying to say. The second question is about is local. City Council yesterday heard an item, you know where I'm going with this, on the NEPA study, which I actually don't remember what that stands for, to study the expansion of Pena Boulevard. And the reason that that's coming up with relation to us is that there was significant discussion at committee about tying that to an expansion of studying transit and the A line, I think, in particular. And I'm wondering, basically, has RTD, you or our lobbyist, Jen Webster, been engaged in that conversation recently with, about the NEPA study or just the broader conversation, around the process to the expansion of Pena? I know there was significant conversation last year, but I'm sort of wondering what's happened in the last couple of months.
Mr. Davies, or Miss Johnson, actually. Whoever would be.
I'll pause since I see.
Yes, I'll start. And Deborah Johnson, General Manager and CEO. For everyone's edification, NEPA stands for the National Environmental Policy Act. Environmental requirements when you're looking at major capital projects relative to impacting the environment as a whole. So as it relates to conversations relative to studies in and around Pena Boulevard, I will share that Michael Davies, myself, and other members of the team have a great working relationship with those at Denver International Airport, recognizing that the study around Pena Boulevard did not have a clear-cut nexus relative to where we sit in the delivery of transit services. We have had various meetings and are amenable should that direction come forward relative to the council as a whole. Regarding the elements that we do currently have on our plate, that has not been something that has been broached with us in a format whereby we would be leaning in, but are aware, and there are standing meetings that are had. I wanted to provide that context before Mr. Davies responded, because I wanted you all to know that, considering the leadership at DEN and the experience relative to RTD, that there is a collaborative approach when we're working on a myriad of different projects. Mr. Davies, I'll yield the floor if you have any other context you would like to provide.
Thank you, General Manager Johnson. Nothing more to really provide other than to just confirm that, yes, we work closely with DEN. And two, are active in trying to answer any questions that Denver City Council may have. If they have a request for data, we've wanted to make sure we provide that data and answer any of their questions with regards to this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. Thank you, Secretary Nicholson, for the questions. I'm moved to Treasurer Banker.
Mr. Davies, you briefly talked about the Clean Transit Agency, the new one that was created that's in CDOT, and you said that there's a meeting coming up at the end of March. Could you send me the link? I'm assuming they allow folks to listen in. Is it a Zoom meeting, or do you have to be there in person?
Mr. Davies.
Yes, thank you, Director Banker. It is an online meeting. And there is an opportunity for public comment as well during these meetings, but I will absolutely send you that info. So if you'd like to join, you can.
I would. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Director O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first thing I wanted to do is say what GM CEO Johnson said is exactly right on the process. And for everyone on the committee, I think it's important to remind any stakeholder that NEPA is a process to identify options and a preferred option, and you can't you can't live your life, and when you want NEPA to serve your purposes, you subscribe to it and you go through all the process. But when you don't want it to happen, you try to undercut it. And I'm very afraid that that is what is going on, where we're trying to pre-identify solutions before the NEPA process, which is required because it was built in part with FAA money. So I hope that we remind people of that from our participation. I know GM CEO Johnson and Phil Washington have a great relationship, and we're following their process. But I think it's really important for this leadership team to remind people that NEPA is the environmental process to go through. You can't pre-identify a solution when it serves you well. And so that's kind of what's going on here. So I appreciate our stance, and I hope we all can help back that up.
Thank you very much for your comments, First Vice Chair O'Keefe. Any further questions or comments from committee members or any directors assembled? Excellent, not seeing any. I just wanted to, it was towards the end of your report, Mr. Davies. I just wanted to say a big shout out for all your guys' help, and especially our lobbyists when it comes down to making connections with our local elected officials. As stated, it's one of our major goals is to not only keep track of the stakeholders we're meeting, but increase our visibility and making sure that there's communication channels between our local electeds and ourselves as the elected board. So just wanted to thank you for all that work on that. And directors, don't forget to fill in those stakeholder tracking forms. That is excellent whenever it is just getting a coffee with your local council member or sitting down with your county commissioners or your mayors. We want to hear about that. So keep up to date with that. Excellent. So that's our first discussion item. I do need to track back a little bit. We have to revisit before going to the next discussion item. This is my bad. I own up to that. We need to take a vote on the board meeting agenda for our meeting that will be happening Tuesday, March 25th. So I do need to take a motion and a second on that.
So moved.
Okay. First Vice Chair O'Keefe is the mover. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I believe that was Secretary Nicholson. Any discussion on that? It's just our agenda, so it shouldn't be too bad. Okay, any no votes? Okay, passes 5-0. Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Snyder, for catching that. All right, so moving forward, we do have one more item of discussion, and that is going to be the proposed bylaw amendments regarding director accountability. So I'd like to start this conversation off by stating that I've heard a lot of feedback from directors and staff that we should be putting some kind of structure in place to ensure the best accountability for our directors. As elected officials, the voters during our election cycles and rare recall efforts provide the ultimate accountability. However, as elections are not held every year and recall efforts are few and far between, it is more than reasonable for us as directors to step in and set some systems in place for us to hold one another accountable for certain standards. As such, after conferring with First Vice Chair O'Keefe, General Counsel Snyder, and Executive Manager Kroll, I've tasked Mr. Kroll with developing the bylaw amendments we have before us for discussion today. This bylaw sets clear expectations for the conduct we expect from one another as directors of this agency. It also clearly defines the accountability measures that can be taken if a director fails to meet our expectations. I'm very eager to hear the thoughts of the committee members and other directors. Before I open up discussion, I want to see if Mr. Kroll, you had anything to add regarding the bylaw change.
No, I think it's all pretty well spelled out in the board report here. Thank you, Chair Bouquet, and for the record, this is Executive Manager Jack Kroll, Executive Manager of the Board Office, Jack Kroll. There are a number of examples across the local government universe of boards acting to set certain standards in place. I would say that it is more common to not have those standards spelled out than it is to have them spelled out. That being said, this is a situation whereby you all, I think, would be wise to set some standards in place. such that they were available to you in the future if needed. And where, in my own experience, having previously served in a local government capacity or similar type of capacity on an elected board, it's really troublesome to address concerns with your fellow board members if you don't have a standard outline and clear information and steps for what can be done to address certain conduct that reflects poorly on the board and doesn't rise to your expectations. And so with that, I got nothing further to add, but I'm happy to answer any questions on what's being proposed.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Kroll, for your comments. And of course, thank you very much for your work with this, as well as First Vice Chair O'Keefe's work and Ms. Snyder's work. First Vice Chair O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to kind of emphasize your points that, I think we talked a little bit about board conduct at the retreat. Certainly I heard conversations about how we were going to interact, and there were some, there's some not tense discussions, but certainly interesting discussions there. And I think the most important thing when we are a group of governance or managers of the direction of the agency is assuming positive intent, and that is usually something that you can do with your peers, and showing grace to people in the organization. I think it's easy to forget the power dynamic between our board and the people in the agency. And I think what you've outlined is kind of the bare minimum standards. And I'm sure it's the same thing you would tell your middle schoolers as far as their behavior. And I think it's important for us to adhere to at least that as a minimum standard. So thank you.
Thank you very much, First Vice Chair O'Keefe. Yes, I think you brought up a very good point. As working with middle schoolers all day, we teach the practice of ultimately ownership and accountability. And I think that falls down to us as directors, and we want to make sure that we are in the best practice forward. And again, this is a stance of, efficiency, but also making sure, we have the common courtesies when we are addressing our full-time staff. So thank you for your comments. Secretary Nicholson.
Yeah, so first off, great work on these. I think it's exactly the thing we need to be doing, setting a high standard for ourselves at a time when certain people who shall remain nameless are critical of the RTD board. I think is the exact right thing to do. So I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that has been put into this. The only question I have is a very specific thing that flagged for me, and that is if there's a disciplinary action taken by the chair, it says that the board shall be able to overrule that with a 2/3 vote. And I'm wondering what made you decide to make that a 2/3 vote rather than a simple majority?
Yeah, great question. So right now how it works is currently any action that can be taken forward, or any form of accountability is a 2/3 vote based on the board, how it stands. How this change would be is, any action that would be to hold a director accountable from the chair's perspective could be overturned by 2/3 vote. Just kind of matching with historically of how it has been in the past. I think it is crucial that there is a overall supermajority consensus to overturn it. I also believe that, this is not only going to be, potentially myself as a chair, it's also going to be future chairs who we elect. We as a board have elected, and for this year, if anything would go forward, the board has elected me with 15 votes, and I would hope that the board would trust when it comes down to my decision. And I believe that the 2/3 vote is appropriate for trying to overturn this. If there is any process where, in layman's terms, we don't believe Chair Bouquet or Chair whoever it is was in the right process for going forward with any action with that. So that's kind of it. It's based on kind of historical measures of the 2/3 vote, as well as I think trusting in your chair itself. So Yep, thank you for the question.
Very helpful, and I will just say the question did not mean that I was disagreeing with it. I was just, it flagged for me, and I wanted to get an explanation.
Yep, no, appreciate it. Treasurer Banker.
I don't have the language in front of me, but if I recall, the language also gave the board the power to impeach another member. Is that correct? And if I could have there were some strong measures that were allowed, and I'm just wondering if they're legal. That's all. So I'm assuming you did run it by our legal staff and they said it was fine. Here we go. Recommendation to the full board for removal of a board officer or director. Okay. Limitation expense. Okay. Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Knoll. Actually, on a minor thing, when we're talking about the board agenda, it would also be helpful to maybe have a corner or something where we can also refer to the language, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, greatly appreciate the question, Director Banker. Any further discussion on this from committee members or any directors present? Well, I will make this plug again. It has been in the weekly update for several weeks now. I would love for us to get feedback regarding this. I think, again, it's going to set up a more efficient process. I think it does hold us as directors accountable. And don't worry, you guys, as the executive committee members, hold me accountable as the chair as well. So just wanted to make that note. So I think it's going to be a good process going forward. I think it cures any behaviors that would be not beneficial for the agency. And again, I think it's an efficiency standpoint. Directors, if you have any feedback for myself, please make sure you reach out in regards to that. Would love to hear any changes before we formally vote on this in April. So thank you all for the discussion. Excellent. All right, moving on. That was our last discussion item for today. Before I open up to others in the category of other matters, I do have two other matters that I would like to address. As you all should be aware, we have scheduled a study session for the evening of April 22nd. The topic will be to discuss various processes and best practices we can take into account when redesigning how we set our goals for a GM, CEO, and by extension, the agency. I know that Director Larson and First Vice Chair O'Keefe have been meeting with CPO Pelegi and the board office executive manager, Mr. Kroll, to discuss the contents of the April 22nd study session. Following that session, the board will meet again for a mid-year retreat sometime in June. And at the time, I expect us to have an initial and robust conversation about the GM CEO goals for 2026. And this will ensure that there's clear direction on where the goals are likely to land and provided in advance of the budget development process. As a reminder to all of you, that was one of our three goals, is to set our GM CEO goals prior to the budget process being set. Then following the June conversation as a board, we'll look to the leadership of the performance committee to review and recommend GM CEO goals for the board's approval in advance of the final approval of the agency's 2026 budget. So again, it will fall back ultimately to performance to look at this. And this will make sure, as mentioned, that it is hitting one of our three goals. Any comments or questions in regards to that other matter? It's again, that April study session is basically setting us up for the June retreat based on the work that Directors O'Keefe and Director Larson have been doing. Any questions on that? Okay, I will move on to the second other matter I had for you all. So the second one is to raise is kind of just give sense of the ongoing training sessions that staff have been hosting. Given that we have three directors who started their terms this January on this committee, all I'm kind of asking for is kind of a simple check-in with respect of how the trainings are going. And if there's any concerns with the volume or pace of these trainings, are there things we can be doing to make it more valuable? And again, as a reminder, the training schedule plan we have has been placed and developed by the board office it adheres to the orientation, onboarding, and tuning education policy that was approved by the board last fall. So just want to check in. As mentioned, Director O'Keefe, Director Banker, and Director Nicholson, you're all new to the board. So just wanted to check in and seeing if you had any comments, questions, or concerns regarding the ongoing training. First Vice Chair O'Keefe.
I think they're quite useful. I've learned a lot in each one of them. You know, the pace is a challenge. I mean, we're taking staff time. We've got to get all of us together, but they trail off into the summer, and I don't know I couldn't give you a way to reorganize them in a different priority. So it's probably just the way it goes. But that's the only issue that I have with them is that we'll have been directors for 1/8 of our term by the time we get through the training, and I just don't know how to reconcile that. It's probably just the way it's got to be. But I compliment the staff. It feels like a really good use of time, and I've learned a lot from each of them.
Thank you very much, First Vice Chair O'Keefe. Director or Treasurer Banker.
First of all, I want to thank staff for all the time that they put into it and the thought, and I appreciate that. I do feel sometimes overwhelmed with how many there are. I know they're important. Some of them I think could be cut shorter. I just counted how many local government meetings I had with, constituents. And since I started, I've had 18 meetings with my towns and elected officials and all that good stuff. So between all of those meetings and the training session, and of course our own committee meetings, I generally have between 1 to 4 meetings almost every day. And so the training sessions, I know they're important. Some I find more interesting than others. I hate to say that, especially when you're talking about finances. I guess maybe if we could just have a little bit more time in between training sessions, that would be my main request. And just the timing. I do appreciate that they're mostly scheduled later in the day because most of the other meetings seem to occur, morning and early afternoon. So that's helpful. And one question for Mr. Knoll. You changed our training today from 3 to 2. Is that correct?
Yes, and
Okay,
Member Kavanaugh?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so the training is today from 2 to 5. Just given the volume of the content there, we wanted to afford everyone additional time.
2 to 5.
This training, service development and service delivery, as GM Johnson rightly pointed out, in order to understand, and I see she has her hand raised, so maybe she can opine better on her behalf than I can.
Ms. Johnson. Ms. Johnson.
Yes, I just wanted to qualify the training session today as service planning, service equity, and service delivery, because none of that can happen if you don't do it in that manner. Because first we have to develop the schedules and things of the like and see what we're going to do and go through a process, and then wanted to ensure that everybody understood where we stood with the obligation of adhering to Title VI, and then understanding the different modalities relative to service delivery. So I just wanted to ensure that people understood that, because it's not just about operations, there's interdependencies, recognizing where we sit. And so that's all I wanted to just interject to qualify and clarify what it is that we're doing today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, CEO.
Thank you.
Treasurer Banker. Oh, good. Okay. Excellent. Well, I think that that is helpful feedback. I'm almost tempted, Mr. Kroll, to potentially maybe send out a survey to our new directors, just to kind of get just a sense and feel of how the trainings have been going. That is helpful feedback. Again, it's a tricky line. It's something that we need to ultimately learn. We need to be trained on this, but it is drinking from a fire hose. It is a lot of information that's absorbed early on. And it would be good to hear from the other new directors to hear how it's been going. So, Mr. Kroll, I might we might have a conversation next week in regards to maybe sending out a survey just to hear from the other directors. So that's great to hear. Okay, so those are my two main items for other matters. Committee members, any other matters we'd like to raise? Okay. Okay, excuse me, sorry, Director or Treasurer Banker.
Okay, real quick. I've been thinking about this and I've mentioned it to a couple of folks. I realize the contract negotiations are still going on with the union, and that's fine. I do hope they get resolved quickly. But I was also wondering, throw this out, you guys can think about it. It would be nice if the board could perhaps have like an open house for non-represented employees, where we have coffee and some snacks and just to say hi, for come meet us and maybe ask us questions, just sort of a meet and greet, that's all. And if you need to get some money, you can take it out of my own budget. So just something to think about. I think it might just be a nice gesture, to tell our staff that their work is appreciated. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the suggestion, Treasurer Banker. I might touch base with our board office next week to see potentially in a future. I do agree with it. Again, I think the idea of us being more publicly visible also includes our represented and non-represented employees as well. So I do really appreciate that suggestion, and I think it aligns with our board goals for this year. So I'll probably touch base with Mr. Kroll on that. Director Larson.
Yeah, I probably should have brought this up earlier, but I was wondering if it would make sense to add it as possibly an agenda item for next week to discuss, just kind of introduce a proposal about the fiscal year, changing the fiscal year.
So potentially bring that up.
Just to kind of really not to make a decision, but just to introduce the idea and some of the logic behind it, with maybe the hopes that by the next meeting we could make a decision.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, this is directly related to the, as you know, the CEO goal alignment with the budget cycle.
Okay, perfect. I mean, my general recommendation would be bring it up as an other matters discussion item. And Mr. Kroll, correct me, we could put that in the agenda as another matters discussion. Mr. Kroll.
I think at this juncture, having approved the agenda, I wouldn't necessarily, undo that action and add something specifically. In the past, we have agendized specific things under other matters. And then finally, any sort of material for this, we would want to coordinate closely with the GM and CEO. So my recommendation would be to, have Director Larson and Director O'Keefe raise the topic in other matters at the end of the meeting, which is a perfectly normal and reasonable place to add it. And then something like this, probably should route through the Finance and Planning Committee as well, as opposed to just being, sent straight to the full board. So in that light, there are probably actually two avenues for Director Larson and to raise this. There will be an agendized discussion item on all of the approved work plans. So the bylaws state that each committee approves the work plans and then the full board reviews them. The board's not reviewing them to approve them again, but rather reviewing them for insight into what all the other committees are doing. And so that would be a perfectly reasonable time too for Director Larson to raise the point around wanting to have a substantive conversation sooner rather than later on the topic of adjusting the fiscal year.
Director Larson, is that okay with you?
Yeah, so I'll just bring it up in other matters, and I might put together a kind of real brief slide presentation, I guess, that just sort of summarizes the reasons. Would that work?
Mr. Kroll?
Typically, if we're going to present something, it would be best to include that in the packet in advance so the public would have awareness. I think also I'm recalling conversations here where we had Director Larson with GM and CEO Johnson, and I think I'm recalling a specific statement by the GM and CEO that she had a preference for positioning this item in front of the board based off of feedback from her staff. So, we certainly can't, change the fiscal year without that input from staff as well. I mean, I guess you could, but it would be wise to get that input.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes, thank you very kindly, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Kroll, for your comments. And Director Larson, when he and I had a conversation, I recommended that he broach this during finance and planning, which he did at the committee. And recognizing that, I think it would be most feasible to go through the committee. I know the chair and I believe the vice chair, and correct me if I'm wrong, committee vice chair Banker, if I misstated, but I do recall that committee discussion under other matters, there seemed to be general consensus with the notion of exploration. So I would recommend Director Larson coordinating, and we could most likely have something go forward at the next finance committee contingent upon the support from Chair Guzman and Vice Chair Banker. Thank you.
Okay, so should I just kind of introduce the topic Tuesday, or not, or just briefly so people are aware, and then do the rest of the work through finance and planning?
If I may,
Ms. Johnson, yeah.
yes. So Director Larson, I would recommend that you say that in a public forum under other matters Tuesday night, and then say intent to work with the committee chairs to bring forward a discussion item at the next Finance and Planning Committee meeting, which is February, oh my God, April 8th or 9th or something like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. All right, and thank you, Director Larson. Yeah, bring it up during other matters for the full board, and then move it forward when it comes to F&P. Second Vice Chair Whitmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to briefly acknowledge the effort at the Capitol yesterday. Obviously, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work and outreach from various directors, but our lobby team did a wonderful job, and obviously our staff, excuse me, just wanted to acknowledge GM CEO and her testimony. It was very powerful and coordinated, the themes that needed to be fleshed out further. And then if my count was right, we had 5 members of our workforce from the union, including the President Longbaum, that asked for the support on the security bill. And as divisive as things can be at our capitals, we had a unanimous vote, both parties, and even 2 in the minority party, thanking the bill sponsors and being adamant supporters. So well done, and let's hope that we can get it through on third reading and then move over to the Senate. So job well done there. Thank you.
Thank you, Second Vice Chair Whitmore. GM CEO Johnson.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Second Vice Chair Whitmore. I did just want to state as well that there were employees that weren't members of the union. There was one manager within commuter rail that was speaking out on behalf of members of his team. And so really it was a collective effort recognizing the impact to all aspects of the organization. So wanted to ensure that we acknowledge other staff members. And so thank you very much for your support, sir, and for being in attendance as well.
Thank you all for your work. Secretary Nicholson. You're on mute, sir.
Yes, it took me. I will continue to screw that up. Yes, thank you. So first, I also listened to the testimony of GMCO Johnson, and I felt like the agency did a really wonderful job on that bill. I'd also mention, because it didn't get brought up, the other component of that bill is that it fixes the fact that we under the measure that was passed last year that provided a couple $100 million of the state budget for police funding. We were not able to apply for that money, and this bill fixes that. which I really appreciate our legislative team for catching that and making sure that RTD will be able to ask for some of that money. The second thing I'll say, and this is in concert with the the focus on our improving working conditions for our represented staff, I have been getting significant community pushback around the lack of a CBA and the need to sign an equitable agreement with our transit workers. And I was just wondering from GMCO Johnson, do you expect to come to the board with are we going to have another meeting at some point in the next couple weeks, week or two or three, with an update, in executive session on what's going on with the CBA?
Thank you, Secretary. GMCO.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Secretary Nicholson, for your question. When I last communicated out to this body, I stated that, and I'm stating this is not privileged information because it's been in the public forum, that both parties had reached impasse and there was collective agreement that we were going to mediation. Those mediation dates, as I had outlined in my communique to all of you, is March 26th and 27th. Hence, there has not been anything that has transpired at this point, but mediation takes place next week. And so basically, we'll keep all apprised relative to what happens as we move forward with the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Johnson.
Can I just follow up very quickly? So would that mean, sorry, my apologies. So would that mean that we should expect an updated meeting in executive session, like early first week of April kind of thing?
Ms. Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Secretary Nicholson. I can't yet opine on that because mediation hasn't started. While there's 2 days, that could be 3 days, it could be 4 days, it could be 5. So I am committing to you to keep you apprised as I have done previously, but I can't give you a timeline at this juncture since mediation has yet to occur. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you both. First Vice Chair O'Keefe.
Just real quickly, back to the passage of the safety bill. Being that it's National Transit Employee Day week, it started out the week, that it was really fitting for us to have a really vocal and unified presence arguing for the safety of our team. And that is like a fundamental thing for showing respect for people doing their job if they're safe. And so I appreciate the work everybody did. And for all the actual transit employees on the call, belated happy Transit Employee Day.
Thank you very much for the comments, Director O'Keefe. Any further discussion in other matters? All right, well, I'll take my chair privilege there. I will piggyback off First Vice Chair O'Keefe. I believe the passage of this this bill is just one step forward to helping to make a welcoming transit environment, which is ultimately crucial not only for our customers, because most of us look through the customer perspective, but also through our employees. Our operators, our officers, they are the lifeline of this agency. And just wanted to say, as the chair of this board, we just say a giant thank you for all that you do and your committed work. So thank you. All right, with seeing no other comments or anything else to discuss in other matters, I do want to note that our next meeting for the executive committee will be Thursday, April 24th at 11:15 p.m. Looking forward for those who will be there and present. Thank you all for joining today. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. I have Secretary Nicholson as the mover. All right. We are adjourned as of 12:54 p.m. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon.